Hi, I'm Patrick O'Grady. I'm a technology reporter with the Phoenix Business Journal. I'm here with Pat Clawson of Lumension. We're going to talk today a little bit about intelligent whitelisting and how it's evolved over the years. Pat, why don't we start out with talking about how whitelisting has evolved and when did it start?
It's a good question. If you remember back to the early days of computing, we were talking about servers. We weren't really talking about laptops and desktops. And in the server world, pre-laptop and desktop, we had very tight controls about what was allowed to electronically access a server or a machine. The early days of computing, we dealt with firewalls that were referred to as application layer firewalls or application control. And they made very conscious decisions about what traffic was allowed in or out. With the explosion of laptops and desktops, we all of a sudden had this massive distributed computing environment that we weren't able to keep quite the same level of control on. So the origins really of the whitelisting concept go back to the early days of computing with very specific requirements about what would be allowed on or off as a server, and the same thing in the firewalling industry.
In the earlier days, why didn't it evolve? Did it stop at a certain point, and what kind of prevented it from continuing on?
There's a couple things that really happened to whitelisting at the time. First of all, whitelisting is a technology that's not overwhelmingly flexible, at least in its original incarnation. It required a business to create a very specific image and one size fit all, and you would push that out to your machines. And while it was exceptionally secure, it didn't allow very much flexibility for the IT admin staff or for the end user for that matter. It was very rigid and very tight. In the simplest of processes like patching your machines or getting an update from Adobe created a problem, and you had to create a whole new image to get stuff out and distributed. And then I think that really kind of leads to the second issue, and that's that whitelisting was hard to use. It created such an enormous amount of IT resource to facilitate a tightly whitelisted environment where every time a machine needed to change, we physically had to go through and create a manual whitelist to then export to the machines and try to manage them that way. Whereas the converse, we had this birth of antivirus, which was very much a blacklisted approach, but it gave flexibility. It put a lot of the responsibility for managing the security of the endpoints on the vendor, not on the IT staff of that individual account. So we saw a V-escalate in terms of usefulness when personal computing really took off.
What was the challenge in the corporate environment for antivirus? Was it easier to use or flexible and gave them a little more options at that point in time?
Absolutely. The antivirus, as the threat landscape as we understood it was evolving in the 90s and the early 2000s, antivirus was a very good tool for very quickly, though reactively, dealing with the signatures for malware that would happen to be detected. What's happened, though, in the last few years, the number of malware detections have escalated at such a pace, that the technology itself can't keep up with that escalation of malware. I think the second thing is that the threats that we're seeing today aren't just college students releasing crazy pieces of malware. These are very targeted for-profit enterprises, people and businesses writing specific code that no antivirus solution is going to identify or detect, and using it to penetrate your networks to steal your intellectual property. That's the kind of thing that antivirus won't help you with.
How does that factor into whitelisting becoming more useful today? Is it easier to use now? Are there some differences in it?
Yeah, I think so. One of the first things to know is that whitelisting didn't fall out of favor because it wasn't super secure. It fell out of favor for the reasons we mentioned. It was less flexible and less usable. But when that curve took off and the malware got to the point where signature-based approaches like antivirus couldn't keep up with it, well, then we had to say, we got to look at something different. Otherwise, we're in deep trouble. And that's corporations and governments. And really what's happened is the advent of a more useful whitelisting technology that is more user-friendly and leverages trust concepts so that it's not all or nothing. And that really is the birth of our intelligent whitelisting, which is the ability to ultimately graylist. It's to be able to leverage blacklisting within an enterprise, to be able to remove bad. It's to be able to identify good and only allow good to run, but in a very dynamic way, so it's not requiring the IT departments to have to manually maintain whitelists. And that interaction is creating a much more intelligent and what we're referring to as an operational whitelisting technology as opposed to one that crunches your IT department.
Gotcha. And where is it kind of in the evolution? Has it been adopted pretty well recently, or is it just kind of on that curve of gaining a little more acceptance?
It's on that curve. I think 2010 was really the year that we started to see vendors of all different shapes and sizes start talking about the benefits of whitelisting and how it's going to be an important part of our future. They're not saying that blacklisting is dead. Okay? Antivirus is not dead. It doesn't go away, but it evolves into something that's more powerful and incorporates whitelisting. So our belief is really 2011 is the year when the very practical, operational, functional whitelisting technologies that reside on existing platforms, not separate standalone platforms, that leverage things like blacklisting to deploy in dirty networks become a practical reality.
There's a lot of different terms thrown around. You've got application control, application whitelisting, intelligent whitelisting. Is there a difference between them, and what does it all mean for people who are looking into it?
The term application control kind of came to birth 6, 7, 8 years ago when a company that we acquired, SecureWave, released this first kind of enterprise whitelisting technology, enterprise manageable, enterprise deployable. Then it was specifically that, a bit of a marketing term trying to say I can control the applications that are allowed to run within your environment in a known good way. But it really was leveraging the concept of whitelisting, which is exactly what they were doing, whitelisting and creating SHA-1 and SHA-256 hashes. So really, as a prospective buyer, you're looking at a whitelisting technology. There will be different marketing terms on it. Here at Lumension, we call it intelligent whitelisting because we believe that it's so much a part of your other security components, and it's not a standalone tool, that it's much more intelligent, much more dynamic, and much more operational. But these really are marketing terms, some of which we originated many years ago, but mostly marketing terms.
All right. Well, thanks, Pat. And we thank you for watching, and we'll be back talking about some other issues involving whitelisting.